Thinking and Speaking in English. Welcome back to Talk and Learn, where we have fun and insightful conversations about life, language, and learning. I am Daniel, your host, and today, we have an exciting topic that I think will help a lot of people.
Yes, I am really looking forward to this one. We are going to talk about how to think and speak in English more naturally.
That is right. It is something many English learners struggle with, but the good news is, with the right techniques and a little patience, it becomes much easier.
Exactly. When I first started learning English, I always thought in my native language first, then translated everything in my head. It was exhausting, but over time, I found ways to train my brain to think directly in English, and that made everything feel smoother and more natural.
That is such an important step. And today, we are going to guide our listeners through some practical ways to start thinking and speaking in English effortlessly.
Let's get started.
Step 1. Start with simple thoughts. So, Mia, what is the first step to thinking in English?
The first step is to start small. Instead of trying to translate complicated ideas, begin with simple thoughts. Look around you and describe what you see. If you are at home, say to yourself, "This is my desk," or "I am making tea." These small sentences help your brain associate English with everyday actions.
That is a great way to build a habit. It sounds simple, but it is very effective.
Yes, and the more you do it, the more automatic it becomes. Another thing that helped me was labeling objects in my home with their English names. I wrote mirror, lamp, and bookshelf on sticky notes and put them around my room. Every time I looked at something, I saw the English word and repeated it in my head.
That is such a smart idea. It creates a strong connection between the word and the object.
Exactly. And even if you do not know the word for something, that is okay. Instead of stopping to look it up, try describing it in English using words you do know. For example, if you do not remember the word microwave, you can say, "It is the machine that heats food quickly." That way, you are still thinking in English, and you can always check the word later.
I love that approach. It trains your brain to be resourceful in English. Step 2. Surround yourself with English. Another great way to start thinking in English is to make it part of your daily life.
Yes, a simple way to do this is by changing the language settings on your phone, social media, and apps to English. It forces you to interact with English in small but meaningful ways.
That is a great tip. And what about consuming content in English?
Oh, that made a huge difference for me. I started reading the news in English, watching movies with English subtitles, and listening to podcasts like this one. At first, I did not understand everything, but over time, my brain got used to the rhythm of the language.
I always tell learners that watching movies and TV shows in English is a fun way to learn.
It really is. And if you are watching a show, try repeating lines from the characters. It is a technique called shadowing, where you mimic how native speakers talk. It helps with pronunciation, intonation, and fluency.
That is such a powerful technique.
Yes, and it does not have to be difficult. You can start with a short sentence from a movie and repeat it a few times. It will feel strange at first, but with practice it gets easier.
Step 3. Speak out loud, even when you are alone. Now, I know a lot of people feel shy when speaking English. What advice do you have for them?
I completely understand that. When I was learning, I was afraid of making mistakes. But then I realized that speaking out loud, even when I was alone, helped me gain confidence.
So you would just talk to yourself?
Yes, I would narrate what I was doing. If I was cooking, I would say, I am cutting vegetables. Now I am boiling water. It sounds funny, but it really helped. I also used to practice conversations in the mirror, introducing myself, talking about my day, even pretending I was ordering food at a restaurant.
That is such a good way to build confidence.
Definitely. And another thing I did was record myself speaking. Then I would listen back and notice what I could improve. It felt strange at first, but it really helped me hear my pronunciation and fluency.
Step 4. Learn common phrases. Another great way to think in English faster is to memorize common phrases.
Yes. When you know useful expressions, you do not have to think so much before speaking. For example, if someone asks, "How are you?" you automatically say, "I am good, thanks. How about you?" It saves time and helps conversations flow naturally.
Right. It is like learning small building blocks that you can use in any conversation.
Exactly. There are so many useful phrases for daily life. If you do not understand something, you can say, "Can you repeat that?" Or "Could you say that more slowly?" If you are at a store, you can ask, "How much is this?" Learning phrases like these makes speaking English much easier.
Step 5. Have conversations with real people. So far, we have talked about practicing alone, but at some point, you need to have real conversations to improve.
Yes, talking to others is the best way to learn. If you have friends who speak English, try chatting with them. If not, there are online communities where you can find language partners. Even short conversations can make a big difference.
And what if someone feels nervous about speaking with others?
I would say start small. Even saying hello to a stranger in English is a great step. And if you make a mistake, do not worry. Most people appreciate the effort. The more you practice, the more natural it feels.
Final thoughts. We have covered so many great tips today. To recap, start with simple thoughts, surround yourself with English, speak out loud, learn common phrases, and have real conversations.
Yes, and most importantly, do not be afraid to make mistakes. Every mistake is a chance to learn.
That is right. Learning English is a journey, and every small step brings you closer to fluency.
Keep practicing, stay patient, and have fun with the process.
Thank you for joining us today. Keep going, and we will see you in the next episode of Talk and Learn.
Bye everyone. Keep learning.
You know, one of the most important lessons I learned while studying languages is thinking directly in that language. It might seem challenging at first, but trust me, it's a game changer. When you translate in your head, you're actually doubling your mental effort. First, your brain has to form a sentence in your native language. Then, it must translate that sentence word by word into English. This process takes extra time, creating awkward pauses and unnatural speech. When you rely on translation, conversations tend to feel slower and more stressful. This makes you hesitate more often, worrying constantly about grammar or vocabulary mistakes. Let me share a personal experience with you to illustrate this. When I started learning Spanish years ago, I constantly translated everything from English into Spanish. At first, I thought it was a good strategy because it seemed logical and systematic. But pretty soon, I noticed that I always felt behind in conversations. Someone would ask me a simple question, like "¿Cómo estás?" meaning, "How are you?" Instead of responding immediately, I'd first think the phrase in English, then carefully translate it into Spanish. Even though this translation was simple, the pause created by my hesitation was noticeable. People would notice that lag, making conversations feel unnatural or slightly awkward. Eventually, I realized something important. Native speakers don't translate in their heads when they speak. They simply express thoughts directly and naturally. When someone asks you, "How are you?" you instantly reply, "I'm fine, thanks," without translating. So, why should it be different when speaking another language like English? That moment was eye-opening for me. I understood that to truly improve my fluency, I had to eliminate that middle step of translating. After practicing direct thinking, I started noticing significant improvements in my fluency. I became quicker, more natural, and conversations began to flow effortlessly. I wasn't stuck looking for the right words as often, and that boosted my confidence tremendously. I felt more engaged, present, and authentic while interacting with others in my second language. So, here's my advice based on what I've experienced. If you're still translating in your head, now is the time to start changing that habit. Thinking directly in English might seem challenging initially, but I promise you, it gets easier with practice. Soon, you'll feel the difference in the way you speak, and others will definitely notice it too. Now, you might wonder, how can I actually start thinking directly in English? My advice is simple: begin small. When you're learning something new, starting with short, manageable thoughts makes a huge difference. You don't need to create complex sentences at first. Instead, start by forming very short and easy sentences in your mind. These sentences should reflect your immediate environment or your current feelings. For instance, if you wake up and see the sunshine outside, think to yourself, "It's sunny today." That's it, nothing complicated, just one short sentence. If you're feeling hungry, don't translate your hunger into your native language first. Just say internally, in English, "I'm hungry." This simple practice helps your mind associate everyday feelings directly with English words. When you're thirsty, quickly say to yourself, "I need water." If you're tired after work, just mentally note, "I'm tired now." This constant, daily practice reinforces your brain's direct connection to English phrases. Let's break this down even further. You can start by setting aside a few minutes each day specifically for this practice. Sit comfortably and describe your surroundings in the simplest way possible. Look around your room and pick the first object you see. Maybe it's your phone. Think to yourself, "This is my phone." Next, perhaps your coffee cup catches your eye. Think clearly, "My coffee is hot." You might notice the weather outside your window and mentally comment, "It's raining now." At this point, don't worry about perfect grammar or sentence structure. Focus solely on getting your mind comfortable thinking directly in English, without translation. Every day, add a few more short sentences to your internal dialogue. For example, while preparing breakfast, silently think, "I'm making eggs." Or as you walk down the street, say quietly to yourself, "That tree is tall." These tiny thoughts seem minor, but they quickly accumulate into a powerful habit. Consistency is critical here. The goal is not complexity, but frequency. Regularly forming these simple sentences conditions your brain to bypass translation altogether. As you become comfortable, gradually introduce slightly longer or more detailed sentences. For example, move from saying, "I'm hungry," to, "I'm hungry, I want to eat breakfast." Notice that you've now linked two thoughts together naturally, without translation. Remember, it's perfectly normal for this process to feel awkward at first. Your brain naturally resists change. But the more consistently you practice, the easier it becomes. One day soon, you'll catch yourself spontaneously thinking simple English thoughts without effort. That's the moment you'll realize you've achieved a significant milestone in your language journey. So keep it simple, stay consistent, and watch your ability to think in English steadily grow. When you're working toward thinking directly in English, visual associations become incredibly important. Visual associations mean connecting English words instantly to images, rather than using translation. It's a technique that helps you build immediate mental links between words and their meanings in English. Instead of seeing an object, thinking about it in your native language, and then translating it, skip directly to English. This helps your brain create a clear pathway, removing unnecessary mental steps that slow you down when speaking. Imagine you're walking into your kitchen and you see an apple sitting right there on the countertop. Instead of first identifying the apple in your native language, instantly think of the English word apple. Visualize the fruit clearly in your mind, associating the image directly and firmly with the word in English. Do this consistently, and your brain will soon recognize and recall English words effortlessly and automatically. This technique works especially well with everyday items around you, like objects at home or items in your workplace. For example, if you're at your desk and notice a pencil, immediately say to yourself, "This is a pencil." Then, glance at your notebook, mentally labeling it in English without hesitating or translating it first. By regularly practicing visual associations, you train your mind to think more efficiently and naturally in English. You also significantly reduce the awkward pauses caused by mentally translating words during conversations. Let me share another personal example of how visual association helped improve my own language fluency. When I was first learning Vietnamese, I struggled to recall words quickly because I always translated from English. I noticed conversations often felt slow and forced, causing me frustration and even embarrassment at times. One day, I decided to change my strategy completely and started practicing visualizing objects directly in Vietnamese. Whenever I saw common objects, like my phone or my keys, I immediately identified them mentally in Vietnamese. Instead of first thinking phone in English, I visually connected the item straight to the Vietnamese word. After only a short period practicing this visual technique, my speaking speed increased noticeably and naturally. I stopped feeling delayed or hesitant, as my vocabulary became far more instinctive through direct visualization. The same method applies to English. Visual associations create a shortcut for your mind, speeding up recall. To effectively build this habit, take small steps daily, labeling 5 or 10 objects around you in English. Pick a specific environment each day, like your kitchen, office, bedroom, or a park, and practice this technique. Be consistent and deliberate with this practice. Your brain will adapt quickly and begin forming new pathways. Another useful way to reinforce visual associations is by practicing simple actions and labeling them in English. When you drink water, immediately think in English, "I'm drinking water," clearly visualizing the action mentally. Or when you open a door, picture the motion clearly while mentally saying in English, "I'm opening the door." Doing this repeatedly throughout your day solidifies the connections, helping English become natural for you. Over time, you'll notice conversations flow more smoothly because English thoughts arise instinctively. Visual associations ultimately help your English feel less like a language you learn, and more like second nature. A powerful method to help you start naturally thinking in English is creating mental narratives throughout your day. This technique involves silently describing your activities as you go through them, entirely in simple English sentences. It may feel unusual initially, but it's one of the most effective ways to develop a fluent, internal English dialogue. The reason this works so well is because it directly connects English with your daily routines and common tasks. When you practice regularly, your brain gradually switches from translation to immediate, natural English thoughts. Let me walk you through exactly how you can begin using this mental narrative approach effectively in your own life. Start with a specific, manageable routine such as your daily morning ritual, describing each step as you do it. For example, when I wake up in the morning, I mentally say something simple to myself like, "I'm getting up now." As I head to the kitchen to start preparing breakfast, I silently continue, thinking clearly, "I'm making coffee." Next, when I check my phone, instead of simply looking at notifications, I mentally narrate, "I'm checking emails." After finishing coffee, as I prepare to leave the house for a jog, I say silently, "I'm going for a run now." This running commentary trains your brain to form direct associations between actions and English phrases instantly. Soon enough, you'll notice your mental narration becomes automatic, occurring naturally and without conscious effort. Let me share with you how transformative this technique was for my own language learning experience in the past. While learning Vietnamese, I found myself frequently struggling with forming sentences quickly during conversations. So, inspired by this strategy, I decided to try mentally narrating my entire morning routine entirely in Vietnamese. Initially, it felt challenging, as I wasn't used to forming spontaneous thoughts directly in a second language. But after just a few days, I realized that my brain began producing Vietnamese phrases much more quickly and naturally. By silently narrating tasks like, "I'm making breakfast," or "I'm brushing my teeth," Vietnamese became second nature. This small yet powerful habit greatly improved my confidence, allowing me to speak much more fluidly in conversations. Similarly, practicing mental narration in English will significantly enhance your comfort level and language fluency. As you build consistency, gradually expand beyond your morning routine, narrating other daily activities as well. For example, while commuting to work, silently describe what you observe: "I'm driving to work," or "I see traffic." If you're cooking dinner in the evening, silently tell yourself, "I'm cooking rice," or "I'm cutting vegetables." Expanding mental narration to diverse activities helps you develop a broader vocabulary naturally, without translation. You will find yourself increasingly comfortable expressing everyday thoughts directly and clearly in English. If certain sentences initially feel too complex or difficult, simplify your thoughts into shorter, clearer statements. For example, instead of thinking, "I'm preparing a complicated meal," say something easy like, "I'm making dinner." Remember, the purpose isn't perfection, but rather training your brain to respond directly and instinctively in English. With ongoing practice, mental narration will quickly shift from a conscious effort to an effortless daily habit. You'll find conversations flow naturally because your internal dialogue is already comfortably happening in English. Give yourself permission to experiment, be patient, and watch how quickly your fluency and confidence begin to grow. Trust me, this habit is one of the simplest yet most powerful ways to accelerate your progress in speaking English. Now, building on mental narratives, let's explore another essential step: surrounding yourself with English stimuli. Creating an English-rich environment is one of the most effective ways to naturally shift your thoughts into English. Think of your environment as the background music of your life. The more English you include, the more fluent you'll feel. When you surround yourself daily with English, your brain slowly starts to treat it as your default mode of thinking. So, let's dive deeper into how exactly you can immerse yourself in English and truly internalize your new language. First, you can start with something as simple as changing your phone's language settings entirely into English. Suddenly, every notification, message, and menu becomes a small English lesson, gently nudging your brain daily. This subtle but persistent exposure trains your mind to recall words and phrases automatically in English. If your social media accounts are currently set in your native language, switch them over immediately to English. Every time you scroll through posts, watch stories, or comment, you're reinforcing your vocabulary and familiarity. Next, consider using English podcasts or audiobooks as your go-to background sound throughout the day. Whether commuting, cooking, or exercising, you can consistently absorb natural language without conscious effort. The key here is choosing content that genuinely sparks your curiosity or aligns with your personal interests. If you love movies, try a podcast reviewing films in English. If you enjoy history, find historical narratives. The important thing is engaging deeply and consistently, creating strong mental associations between fun and English. You can also extend this immersive approach to visual reminders around your home or workspace for added reinforcement. Take a few minutes to label common household items clearly with English sticky notes, placed visibly around the room. For instance, label your mirror, chair, bookshelf, fridge, desk, or even the window, and see them every day. Each glance will gently remind your brain of the correct English words, reinforcing your vocabulary naturally. This method helps tremendously, especially in building quick and effortless recall during everyday conversations. Another effective immersion tip is keeping an English language journal or diary beside your bed or desk. Write down a few sentences about your day each evening entirely in English, no matter how simple your language. This practice keeps your mind regularly producing English, helping it become more natural and spontaneous for you. Soon, you'll notice your ability to form ideas quickly and comfortably in English improving with each passing week. Personally, I've seen how powerful immersive techniques can be through my own experience of learning Vietnamese. When I committed myself to using Vietnamese daily, my fluency increased faster than ever before in my studies. My phone language, social media feeds, and even the books I read were exclusively Vietnamese for several months. At first, it was intimidating, but within weeks, the language felt more natural, familiar, and comfortable to me. I even started dreaming occasionally in Vietnamese, a clear sign of deep subconscious integration of the language. The key takeaway here is consistency. Surround yourself daily with English, even in small, manageable ways. These daily exposures slowly and steadily create an environment that allows your English fluency to flourish. Don't underestimate how impactful small, frequent interactions with English can be for your language development. Now, let's move on to something that's crucial yet often overlooked: embracing imperfection and ambiguity. When you're learning to think in English, it's essential to become comfortable with making mistakes along the way. Trying to form perfect sentences immediately can actually hinder your progress and discourage natural thinking. Accepting imperfection allows you to speak more freely, quickly, and confidently, even if it's not always perfect. The goal isn't flawless grammar or vocabulary right away, but rather to build your fluency step by step, naturally. I understand that making mistakes or forming incomplete sentences can initially feel uncomfortable or awkward. Many learners hesitate to speak or think spontaneously because they're afraid of sounding incorrect or unclear. However, the willingness to tolerate ambiguity in errors is exactly what accelerates language development. Let me give you a personal example from my own journey to show how beneficial embracing imperfection can be. When I was learning Vietnamese, I initially struggled to form sentences quickly and naturally during conversations. At first, I aimed to create perfect, grammatically correct sentences, which only slowed down my speaking considerably. One day, I decided to simplify my thinking drastically and allow myself to use incomplete, broken sentences. For instance, instead of trying to perfectly say, "I'm going to the store today," I'd simply say, "Go store today." At first, these simplified sentences sounded strange to me, but they immediately allowed me to speak much faster. Interestingly, people still clearly understood my meaning, even if my grammar was incomplete or slightly incorrect. As I became more comfortable expressing myself in this imperfect way, my confidence steadily improved too. Over time, these incomplete sentences naturally evolved into more complex, complete phrases, effortlessly. "Go store today" gradually became "I go store today," then eventually, "I'm going to the store today." This gradual progression taught me a powerful lesson: perfection isn't necessary when first developing fluency. Instead, allowing ambiguity and embracing imperfections actually speeds up the natural learning process. This shift in mindset not only improved my speaking speed but made conversations more comfortable and enjoyable. I encourage you to adopt a similar mindset as you practice thinking directly in English throughout your day. Whenever you find yourself hesitating, remind yourself it's completely okay to use incomplete English sentences. Short, imperfect phrases like "need water," "feel cold," or "go sleep now" are perfectly acceptable initially. Over time, as your brain adapts and expands, these simple expressions naturally evolve into complete sentences. Each imperfect thought you form is one valuable step forward, laying the groundwork for eventual fluency. Remember, native English speakers themselves often speak casually and imperfectly in daily conversations too. They rarely form textbook perfect sentences during informal speech, yet their communication remains effective. Adopting a relaxed, forgiving approach toward your own English will greatly enhance your speaking confidence. Ultimately, embracing ambiguity and imperfection means giving yourself the freedom to learn naturally and openly. So, next time you catch yourself worrying about mistakes or incomplete sentences, take a deep breath and smile. Remind yourself that language learning is a beautiful, messy, rewarding journey, imperfection included. Now, let's talk about another essential element to speed up thinking in English: language chunks and patterns. Language chunks are phrases or groups of words that native speakers often use repeatedly in daily conversations. Learning these common phrases helps you express yourself fluently without having to translate word by word. By memorizing these fixed expressions, your brain becomes quicker at accessing English directly and naturally. Instead of slowly forming sentences from scratch, you'll effortlessly recall pre-built language blocks instantly. Think about everyday expressions like, "It's been a long day," or "I can't wait to see you." These phrases are very common, and native speakers often say them automatically without much thought or effort. If you regularly practice and memorize these language chunks, they quickly become second nature to your speaking. You'll begin to naturally use them at the right moments, effortlessly improving your conversational flow and speed. When your mind stores complete phrases, it doesn't waste energy translating each word individually during speech. I experienced the power of language chunks firsthand while studying Vietnamese in my early days of learning. Initially, I struggled with speaking because I constantly tried forming each sentence slowly, piece by piece. Then, I started memorizing common Vietnamese phrases such as, "See you tomorrow," or "I'm very busy today." At first, it felt unusual to memorize complete phrases rather than individual vocabulary or grammar rules. However, the change was dramatic. I immediately noticed how quickly these phrases came out during conversations. This technique accelerated my fluency significantly, and my confidence increased noticeably during interactions. It also allowed me to focus more on the conversation itself rather than struggling with vocabulary selection. You can achieve similar results by actively identifying and memorizing common English phrases relevant to you. Pay close attention when listening to native speakers, noticing frequent expressions used during their conversations. Write these expressions down and practice repeating them daily until you comfortably recall them without effort. You could even organize these phrases by context, such as greetings, farewells, compliments, requests, or apologies. For example, greeting phrases like, "How's it going?" or "Good to see you," become second nature with repetition. Complimenting someone with phrases like, "You did a great job," or "That sounds amazing," quickly feels natural. When requesting help, you'll easily say, "Could you give me a hand?" or "Do you mind helping me with this?" Each memorized chunk gives your brain an instant pathway to fluent English expression, free from translation delays. Remember, language is not just isolated vocabulary and grammar, it's a dynamic system of frequently used patterns. Mastering these patterns and chunks empowers you to think directly and speak naturally in any situation. Over time, you'll feel English becoming a natural extension of your thoughts rather than a separate, foreign tool. So, start memorizing those common phrases today, and watch your spoken fluency dramatically improve in conversations. Now, having built strong internal language skills, let's finally talk about transitioning from thinking to speaking. One of the most rewarding moments in language learning is when internal dialogues become effortless conversations. If you've been consistently practicing English thoughts, you'll soon notice improvements in your spoken fluency. Thinking in English directly impacts your ability to express yourself clearly and confidently in real interactions. In other words, internal thinking practice is the bridge that seamlessly connects your mind to fluent spoken words. When you regularly engage in internal English dialogues, your brain becomes accustomed to expressing ideas clearly. This habitual practice significantly reduces hesitation, translating your mental fluency into smoother conversations. Initially, you might notice the transition from thought to speech feels slightly uncomfortable or unnatural. However, this feeling quickly fades as your mind adapts to expressing internal thoughts outwardly, without translation. The key is consistently practicing internal dialogues and then gradually introducing them into real-life conversations. For example, when I first started practicing internal dialogues in Vietnamese, I hesitated in actual conversations. But after continuous practice, I felt more courageous to test these mental conversations out loud with friends. Soon enough, my internal fluency naturally emerged during real-life conversations, improving my confidence greatly. Situations that previously intimidated me, like social gatherings or ordering at a busy restaurant, became enjoyable. Thinking regularly in Vietnamese internally had directly translated into a confident, spontaneous spoken fluency. You too can experience this smooth transition from internal English thoughts to fluent external conversations. Start small, practicing short internal dialogues, then gradually challenge yourself to use them in real scenarios. If you practice internal conversations about common topics, you'll comfortably handle similar topics when speaking. For instance, practice mentally ordering food in English, then confidently place your order at your favorite cafe. Imagine simple dialogues with colleagues or friends internally, then try starting those conversations in real life. As you practice more, your hesitation reduces, making speaking in English feel natural, comfortable, and enjoyable. You'll discover conversations no longer seem intimidating because your brain has rehearsed the dialogue mentally. Moreover, you'll notice that your conversations in English gradually become smoother, faster, and more authentic. This shift from internal thinking practice to fluent conversations will significantly boost your self-confidence. Ultimately, your internal practice is preparing you for meaningful connections and genuine conversations in English. Keep challenging yourself to use your internal dialogues openly, and you'll soon speak English effortlessly. Trust the process. Thinking directly in English daily naturally evolves into clear, confident spoken communication. Keep going, embrace opportunities to practice, and soon you'll find yourself speaking fluently, naturally, and joyfully. Before we wrap up today's episode, let's quickly recap the key ideas we've explored together. We've discussed powerful techniques to help you think directly and naturally in English, without translation. Remember, start small, use visual associations, and practice mental dialogues throughout your daily routines. Surround yourself with English, actively redirect your thoughts, and embrace imperfection in your language journey. Most importantly, trust the process and allow your internal practice to naturally lead to confident conversations. Every step you take brings you closer to true fluency, helping you communicate clearly, effortlessly, and authentically. Thank you so much for joining me today and investing in yourself by committing to your English learning goals. I hope these strategies inspire you to keep practicing and pushing beyond your comfort zone each day. Until next time, stay positive, keep practicing, and enjoy every moment of your English speaking journey. See you soon in our next episode. Take care.